Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live from around Granbury, Texas. Brazos River, right over there. Hey, I'm glad you're joining us. First thing up to bat is we've got dates set for the Institute of Higher Pondology for May, and we're going to have one in October as well. We've got room for about 9 or 10 people. I have one guy that's already said, yeah, count me in. And the dates for this one are going to be May 30, 31st, and June 1st. So you'll arrive on Thursday afternoon. We'll have a kind of a reception, a little greeting. Everybody get to know each other. We'll establish our mission and then get hot and heavy with it. A lot of hands-on, electrofishing, moving fish, identifying plants. We're going to help the Wests. We're going to have it at West Haven Ranch. Bobby and Susan West, their son Jacob, their family owns a ranch just north of St. Joe, Texas. And we can sleep about 10 people there. And there's a house adjacent that I think's got 4 bedrooms that we can use as well if we need it. But in order to make this thing go, I'd like to have at least 8 people sign up, and we can have as many as 12. I don't think we'd be comfortable with more than 12. So we'd love for you to join in and come see what we got going on. This will be the 4th one we've done, and I've gotten a lot of good comments. So tonight I thought I'd talk about growing huge fish. Look at there. There's David Schneiderman. Howdy, Bill. Who's Bill? You talking about Bill Dance or what? No, I know it's a typo, right? John Henry. Hello there, brother. David Schneiderman, Easy Docks of Texas. Check him out if you're looking at buying a dock, because he's the go-to for that. And he's also a sponsor. He's an advertiser in Pond Boss Magazine. I've not gotten to know David a long time, and he's just as passionate about ponds as any of us are. So let's talk about growing trophy bass. Oh, look at there, spell check. You dictated my name in there and it missed it. I get it. Hello, Mark Dyer. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Put that in the comment section. Click like, share this video to your timeline, and you're going to be eligible for a drawing, which I intended to do it today and I forgot. For a Bird Dog mug. It's like a Yeti cup, except it's a Polar Camel. It's a good mug, though. I know I use it every day. I left it in the truck last week. Forgot to bring it in and show it to everybody. Hello, Deborah Corlew. There's Scott and Leah Grooms checking in from up around Beggs, Oklahoma. Good to see you guys. Yep, Leah knows what to do. She's got it. So I thought today I'd start off the conversation talking about how to grow really, really big fish. Wayne, golly, man, you took a break from building the house to come spend the part of the evening with us. I'm so tickled. We still need to get you and Josie out. You know, it's on my list. Y'all just got to say when, because I know it's just more than you can handle sometimes, and then there's not enough getting done, and you need more to handle. I get it. We've been through that. So Wayne and Josie are building a house overlooking their beautiful lake down in Bosque County, I believe it is, Texas. Iredell, yeah. So anyway, welcome, Wayne. Glad to see you. So say you want to grow some big fish. And Wayne, I know that's part of what you want to do. So, and Wayne and I have had this conversation personally. Number one thing is you got to have happy water, and they've got that. Matter of fact, they had more happy water than they needed the night that it flooded down there. The next piece is the right kind of habitat for the species of fish that want to grow, and then there's the food chain part. One thing I want to start off talking about is if you really want to grow huge fish, whether it's huge bluegill, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, whatever it is, you got to have the right kind of food at the right times. That's a big deal. Genetics are significant. You don't want the wrong genetics. You want the right genetics. And it's really easy for us to get kind of caught up in the Florida strain, discussions. But depending on where you are, that might be the worst genetics. If you're trying to grow big bass in Iowa, good for Josie. She's shopping for lights. Let's see Tommy. That's Jason Foley. Good to see you. Tommy Wells, our tattoo man. Can you grow trophy bluegill and channel catfish together in the same pond? Yes, you can. Now let me tell you, let's talk about that, because one of the topics I want to knock out genetics first, and then I want to talk about population dynamics, discussing that question you just talked about, Tommy. That's a great question, very timely. So you want to pick the right genetics for your location. You know, if you're in Indiana and you want to grow some of the biggest bluegill on the planet, you can. You can grow some bluegill up to 2 pounds, maybe bigger, if you hold your mouth right and you feed them right. You know, the food chain is very important. And one of the key things that people miss, especially with largemouth bass, is making sure that the bass have the right food at the right time. There's way too much emphasis placed on genetics. So I was talking to a young man yesterday who had bought some F1 tiger bass, and his opinion was that they weren't performing as they were promised. Well, yes, they do. But what the promise is that even though you may buy the very best genetics on the planet, that doesn't mean every fish that carries those genetics is going to have the propensity to grow huge. They're not. You know, like with bass, for example, if you look at it, half of them are boys. You're going to throw those out because they're not going to gain much weight at all. If they hit 2 pounds, that's a good fish. You know, and then there's this thing, you've heard me talk about it. If you watch this show much, you've heard me talk about this before, talking about plasticity. If you take 1,000 bass and put them in your 10-acre lake, 500 of them are girls, and of those 500, there'll be about 30%, 25 to 30%, maybe 150 of those 500, so 15% of the total that will have the genetic propensity and the aggressive nature and the ability to adapt to that lake. Now, if you took that same 1,000 bass and put them in a 10-acre lake 200 miles away, the numbers will be the same. It'll just be different fish. So those fish have to grow up in that environment, and part of your job is to be sure that you've got the best genetics for your region. And then you got to understand the dynamics of that population. Because even if those genetics are superior, if they don't have the opportunity, and that's part of your job as a manager, if they don't have the opportunity, the chances of them growing to huge sizes is greatly diminished. And here's how that happens. Let's say that you stock a brand new lake, and a newly stocked new lake has got the best odds of growing the most trophy fish. That's real important. I call that the new lake syndrome, because you can control the numbers of fish that are stocked and create the food chain. Hello, Eric Kellerman. Greetings from Beaumont. Oh, greetings from Granbury. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. So the genetics are significant, but they're not the catch-all. So here's where I'm going. Let's say 15% of those fish, 30% of the females in largemouth bass or bluegill. Now, bluegill, the males and the females both got a shot at growing to pretty big sizes, trophy sizes. If they miss an opportunity for food, you won't know it till the tail end of their lives. So now a bass can go without food for 4 days or 5 days and then make it up. But if they miss 6, 7, 8 days, they're not going to make it up. So even if they have what it takes genetically, the ingredients to get to 15 pounds, and they're out of food for 6 months because there's way too many mouths and you're not culling right, you're going to see it at the other end. They might hit 10. If they go without food for too long, for a year or so, they're going to top out at 8 or 9 pounds, even though the genetics were perfect. So a key part of trying to grow huge fish is a regulated, selective harvest plan. Like I've said hundreds of times, a lake or a pond is like a garden. You're going to plant it, you're going to nurture it, at some point you got to harvest it. And if the mission is to grow big fish, you need to protect the best fish. You need to protect the fastest growing fish and the size classes of fish just below that. Those fastest growing fish, they're going to be kind of like thoroughbreds coming out of the starting gate. They're going to grow huge and fast. But the ones right behind them are kind of like the mule pulling the plow. After 4 or 5 years, they may be the ones that pass up the thoroughbreds because it's a long haul. You know, hello, Fred Bingaman. Good to see you, brother. Fred Bingaman, our good friend. Here's to Fred right there, a little TX bourbon. Just a little. Neat. Salute. Water in the Bird Dog cup. Water and ice works good. But going back to Tommy's question, can you grow trophy bluegill and channel catfish together in the same pond? Yes, you can. Now, here's the catch to that. Channel catfish, once they get to be about 2.5 pounds, are pretty efficient predators. Now, a 2.5 pound channel catfish is going to compete mouth size wise with probably a 10 to 14 inch largemouth bass. So, channel catfish, people think that they're bottom feeders. They're not. They're like teenagers. They're going to go to the refrigerator and they're going to open it up and look for meat. If they find meat, they're going to eat it. You know, if there's hot dogs, they'll eat that. But if they have to eat salad, they will. But they're not going to be rooting around in the mud. Channel cat don't do that, contrary to popular belief. But here's what goes on with trophy bluegill and channel catfish together in the same pond. They're not typically as efficient predators as largemouth bass are. Your channels are 6 to 10 pounds. They rule the roost, dude. So the answer is yes, you can grow big bluegills in there. You just got to be able to have enough bluegills, and it depends on how many channel cat you got. If you have channel catfish that are 6 to 10 pounds, and you've got in a 1 acre pond, if you got say 150 of those things, you're pretty well maxed out with carrying capacity, and they're going to rule the roost. They're going to eat as many bluegills as you can grow. But when you're feeding channel catfish and feeding bluegills, and you got channel catfish that are that size as what Tommy's got, PWD make Kapansanan. Oh, I know I butchered that. Watching from the Philippines. All right, that's pretty cool. What time of day is it there? Did you get up in the middle of the night to watch this? Probably morning over there. So to stay with Tommy's question right quick is, if you will feed your fish, then you're going to see much better growth rates. Now, the catfish can grow just fine on a grain-based feed, but the bluegill won't. 60 channel catfish in an acre and a half pond. Okay, that's good. So you're not at your carrying capacity. So if you've got 60 fish, say they average 8, that's 480 pounds in an acre and a half. Yeah, you're under carrying capacity. And yes, you can grow bluegills to large sizes. You're going to need to feed them. Now, another choice you can make with channel catfish is to use some of the hybrid sunfish. The hybrid sunfish, they used to call them the Georgia Giant. I think that was a trademark name from a hatchery over in Georgia many moons ago. I don't even know if they're still in business or not. It was a long time ago. But those fish don't reproduce nearly as much as either of the parents. They're a cross between a bluegill and a green sunfish. Typically, a green sunfish is female and a male bluegill. That's where those hybrids come from. And they're pretty commonly stocked with channel catfish. They'll get to be 1.25 pounds, 1.5 pounds. The guys with the Georgia Giant guys used to have a picture of one that weighed 5 pounds, and I think that's the only one that size they raised in 30 years or something. They don't get that big. That one was an anomaly, but they'll get to be 1.5 pounds or so. Jim Ronning from South Dakota. Good to see you. All right, Eric, let's see. You got something kicking here. Let's see what you got, buddy. My fisher's biologist gave me a survey log to record weight and length of my largemouth bass. Then I look up the length on the chart on the back, the corresponding expected weight. Then I take the actual weight divided by the expected weight to get a percent. She says anything over 95% is good. I assume I should pull any bass that is not thriving in less than 95%. Your thoughts? My thoughts are send me an email, and I'll send you an Excel spreadsheet where you can plug those links and weights in, and they'll do it for you. It'll tell you the percentages automatically. All you got to do is type in the length in the length column and the weight in the weight column. It'll look across the spreadsheet, and it's going to tell you. So now, here's what you do. This is really smart. If you're going to try to grow big bass, so where Eric's going here is he's right on. So my thoughts are right on. So here's the way that you look at culling. Look at your fish population with a big enough sample that you can make decisions. So if you catch 5 bass and 4 of them are overweight and one's average, you can't make any decisions from that. But once you catch 30 or 40 bass, depending on the size of that lake or that pond, Then you can start making some decisions. Now, what you want to do is you want to track those lengths and weights. And if you really, really, really want to grow some big fish, you're watching the trends. And what you'll see is when you plug these fish numbers into a spreadsheet, it's going to compare it to the average curve or a standard curve. So the standard curve is typically within 5% of average. Average fluctuates with the season. You know, the spring average fish is going to weigh different than the fall average fish or a post-spawn average fish. So what the standard curve does is give you the go-by, and then you compare your fish to that standard curve, and over a few months to a few years, you're seeing the trends. And it won't be long. You know, once you've first stocked a pond or a lake, you give it 3 years to 3.5 years, that's when you're going to start seeing it's time to make some decisions on fish to cull. For example, let's say you stock 100 bass per acre, and you get 3 years down the road, and some of those bass are 14 inches long and weigh 1 pound and 10 ounces and are healthy as they can be, but you've also got some that are 7 pounds. So then you get to decide, do I want to cull those smaller fish even though they're overweight? You know, now once the fish begin to reproduce, now you got these puppies coming up the mill, and it's time to be judging their weights. That's when the dynamics begin to shift. So if you're weighing and measuring fish and you're plugging them into this spreadsheet that I'll send you, just send me an email, say, hey, I want the bass spreadsheet, and I'll turn around, attach it to the email, reply, and send it on. So doing that, then you can track the trends over a longer period of time. And you can see when your fish, and what will happen is there'll be a certain size class of fish that becomes a little bit overpopulated and starts to eat the food chain for that size class of fish. And then you'll start to see their numbers start to go down, or their numbers not meaning how many fish, meaning their weight numbers. For example, a 10-inch bass should weigh 10 ounces, a 12-inch bass should weigh 12 ounces. A 14-inch bass should weigh 1 pound 7 ounces. If your bass are on that line, they're right along that standard curve. But if you catch a 14-inch bass that weighs 1 pound and 2 ounces, it lost weight. And that's going to be one of the fish that you're going to target to want to be able to start taking some of those out. So there you go. There's a pretty good answer for that. So, Deborah, do channel catfish breed in a pond, and are albino catfish sterile? Oh, I love that's a great question. Channel catfish are cavity spawners. So here's my take on that. First of all, albino channel catfish are not sterile. If they're truly albinos, they'll breed true. If you breed a true albino male with a true albino female, you get all albino babies. So, and they're very fertile. They are. You can tell by the look on their face. Do channel catfish breed in a pond? You got to have a place for them to hide. Now, I discourage that, because if you've got a pond with channel catfish, that typically means you want catfish on purpose, which means a lot of folks like to grow fish for meat, and that's a classic fish to grow for meat. So if they start to reproduce and there's not enough predators in there to eat some of the baby channel catfish, their numbers get out of control. And catfish are notorious for outgrowing their space. And what that means is they'll keep growing and eating and pooping and growing and pee-peeing and all that. And then here it doesn't take long, just a few years. That's why I was asking Tommy a while ago how many catfish he's got. Because if he had 200 catfish from 6 to 10 pounds in an 1.5 acre pond, he's way overcrowded, and nature's going to make a correction, and he wouldn't like it. Because a bunch of those fish, especially the older, bigger ones that have the age on them and they're weaker, they'll be doing the backstroke, and nobody wants to see that. So, channel catfish are so inexpensive. You can buy 100 catfish fingerlings for $50. So I'd much rather see you control the numbers by not providing spawning habitat. Here's a classic example of that. Ray Scott, our dearly departed longtime friend, founder of BASS, he had a 55-acre lake over near Montgomery, Alabama, Pentlala, and I helped him with that lake probably for 15 years. He had put in a bunch of culverts, concrete culverts that the county commissioner gave him, and he put them in there for bass structure. Well, one of the hatcheries that stocked a few fathead minnows inadvertently had a few channel catfish that were left in a concrete vat, and ended up stocking them in Ray's Lake, and he had this ongoing for years and years and years. Channel catfish were spawning in those culverts. So they were actually going against the population of fish that he desired, and he grew to not like channel catfish nearly as much. Let's see here. What is Mark Dyer saying here? Do you have those spreadsheets for other fish in addition? Yes, I do. Yep, if you will email me, Mark, and I think on that spreadsheet, Jim Allen is the one that helped put it together, from our friend from Kentucky. And if he's on here, I'll thank you. Yeah, I'm going to thank him anyway. Hello, John Wilson. Good to see you, buddy. Yep. Hashtag Pond Balls Magazine. You got that right. So I think on that sheet, I think is bluegill, red ear sunfish. I think crappie may be on it too. So they're all on the same spreadsheet, just different sheets in that Excel spreadsheet. So email me and I'll send it to you. I'll be looking at emails tomorrow for sure. Okay. Yep. Oh man, I love John Wilson. We need to spend some time together, man. Are you going to go to Bob Robinson's retirement party in Minnesota? I'm going to go do that. And if you are, I'll see you there. We use tractor tires for channel cat spawning, says Justin Ludwig. Yep, that's kind of a common practice. So you can. They spawn in cavities. I mean, they'll where wind and wave action undercuts a shore, they'll spawn in that. I mean, that's where people go noodling in rivers and lakes and things, is places like that. Deborah says we do not want them reproducing. We were just asking why we were asking. The grandkids wanted to have a competition of catching an albino cat. We have a 10-acre pond and we're just thinking of getting 2. Well, if you get 2, they'll never catch them. And if you have a smaller pond on the place, buy 50 and put them in a smaller pond. That way they won't disrupt your fishery, your bigger lake. And 2 of them are not going to disrupt a 10-acre pond. You just never see them again. They'll have everything they need. Why would they bite a hook? You know, a 10-acre pond, and you got 2 catfish in it. 1 acre is about the size of a football field. So you got 10 football fields that 2 catfish can get lost. Yep. Hey, you know what, Gabba? I get it. I got 13 little ankle biters that we play with all the time. The 5-year-old Sawyer, he is completely enamored with fishing, and every time he comes, there's a little pond here where we live in Pecan Plantation, and he absolutely wants to go fishing. So last time he was here, we went, and I don't know, of course, attention spans aren't that long, you know, and I think he caught like 15 bluegills in 30 minutes and threw them all back. And he says, well, Papa, can't we eat some of these? And I can't say no to that. No, dude, we don't want you to catch food for the family. Of course you can eat some. So I said, hey, go back to my truck, get that bucket, bring it down here, and we'll put some in it. Well, the little fart ran 50 yards up the hill to where my pickup was parked, away from this pond. And he grabbed the bucket and brought it back down. The bucket probably weighed almost as much as he did. And he caught 4 or 5 bluegill. We brought them home, scaled them, gutted them, beheaded them, and cooked them whole. And I let him eat the tail first. That's my favorite part. And he was a little bit skittish about it, but you can't go hang out with the pond boss and not do what I'm telling you about fish when you're 5 years old and you belong to me. Hello, Wyatt, my friend from Denver with the ranch near Abilene, Texas. It's been a long time. We still listen. Love that you're back on the regular. And so am I. I'm glad I'm back on the regular schedule. Bought a bunch of fish today. Hope you're blessed with some rain. You know, I don't know if you guys have got rain over there north of Abilene, but I know that there's been some kind of south and east of Abilene. You know, Baird and that area, Cisco, they've gotten a lot of rain. So, hey, send me some more questions. In the meantime, let's do a little commercial. Help pay for this thing. Yeah. Pond Balls Magazine. And every one of you regulars know exactly what I'm going to say next. Chime in with me, even though nobody can hear you. Say it. Say it. $35 a year. It lasts a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date. $35. Subscription for a year. So, Yeah, really, $35. You can swing that, and it's what fuels the economy. It's what makes our advertisers happy. It's what allows you to read all the cool stuff that's coming up in the next issue. The March-April issue has been in the mailbox for 4 or 5 days. Matter of fact, I got mine. I like to be on the subscription list to be sure I know that people are getting it, but that's what it looks like coming in. It comes in a little plastic bag. It's really funny. I'll tell you a story. Oh, I guess it was probably 10 years ago. We were getting a handful of complaints from people. They weren't getting their magazine. I need to do a little cough medicine. Yep. TX bourbon. And come to find out, one of them, and I published this, I think might be in this issue. I think I wrote about it and asked the boss, where the rural mail carrier, a woman, which I love this. It was kind of against the law, but I think it's a cool story. So when Pawn Boss would come to that subscriber, she'd hijack it, take it home and read it, and then deliver it a week or 10 days later. And I don't know how many months, how many issues in a row we mailed a makeup copy because that woman had dadgum stealing his magazine and reading it and then putting it in his mailbox. And that happened several times. Plus, the covers were being torn off with the post office equipment. You know, so I said, heck with it, we're going to put it in a plastic bag. So this is the way you get it, with your address stamped on it right there. You know, in this issue, there's 2 pieces. There's the resource guide. We publish a resource guide annually of people that we've vetted, that we totally trust. David Schneiderman's in here. At least he better be. I know he is. I'm not going to bust him. He knows. And our resource guide is also online. So please do. Yeah, subscribe to the magazine. Also like to throw out some appreciation to Purina Mills. I've had the pleasure of being one of their ambassadors for a long, long time. And I've told this story here before, but back around 1995 or 96, I sent them a letter and said, hey, we want you to advertise in the magazine. They called and said, hey, we want the inside front cover and maybe the back cover, but we also want to spend some time with you. So they spent time with me, and they started saying, you know what, we see this pond management industry as a burgeoning opportunity, and we'd like to do some things to help. What can we do? Well, a little barbecue joint, probably 25 miles from where I'm sitting right now, Hammond's Barbecue in Glen Rose, Texas. We were eating ribs on butcher paper on a picnic table inside that barbecue joint. And Dr. Gordon Ballum said, okay, what do you guys need in this industry? And I said, you know, we keep feeding different sizes of different species of fish the same feed. You know, you've got this grain-based fish food, like catfish, 32% protein. Can you make a feed that's got different size pellets to feed different size fish? Man, they looked at each other, and you can see the light bulbs going off. They started talking their language, and shoot, it wasn't a month later, I had a pallet of unmarked bags of the product that's now called Gamefish Chow. So Gamefish Chow was born from an idea, bred in a barbecue joint, eating ribs on butcher paper at a picnic table. And since then, they've been very receptive to what the industry wants. And so I love to have them. I don't work for them, but I am an ambassador for them, so I do believe in what they're doing. So I'm totally right there. Texas Hunter Feeders, if you're going to buy fish food, you need to get it in the water. Texas Hunter Feeders. Chris Blood usually checks in. He'll probably be here in a little bit. It's kind of still daylight outside, so he's probably doing something fun other than this. And so Texas Hunter, not only are their products good, their customer service is astonishing. You know, they're kind of one of these modern day throwback companies that pay attention to what you say. If there's an issue, they attack it. They go. Well, let's see. Since I've been doing a commercial, there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. Let me check it out here. Let's see here. John Moore, last week, he asked about using hybrid striped bass to help control gizzard shad. Is it a real concern? I have a fairly good population of largemouth bass. I'm just curious if they're a problem. have a minor turbidity issue, but not too bad. Okay, let me tell you how to answer that. Well, here's the answer I'm going to give you for that. If the gizzard shad are getting out of hand, and let me do it this way. I'm a big believer in gizzard shad in a largemouth bass pond where at least 25% of your bass are 3 pounds or bigger. 25% of the mass. Not necessarily 25% of the head count, but 25% of the mass. So if your pond is capable of producing 75 to 100 pounds of bass per acre of water, I want 25 to 35 pounds of those to be at least 3 pounds or bigger. Because what happens is gizzard shad are really prolific. They spawn once a year. They're bottom feeders. They grow fast. So what you essentially want is enough adult gizzard shad to have enough eggs, to have enough babies, to fill a gap between bluegill spawns to feed those larger bass before the gizzard shad get too big. If they get too big and too many of them, their density increases, they can certainly cause the water to become muddy. And then at some point, I don't know what it is, 200 to 300 pounds per acre probably, maybe a little bit more than that, they start giving off a pheromone that inhibits reproduction, not only of them, but other fish that are in the pond. So that's when they get to be a problem. So in every trophy bass lake I've ever managed, I end up with gizzard shad on purpose, but not until I'm confident, until year 3 or 4 after a newly stocked lake has been starting to be managed. That's when I'll add gizzard shad. Hello, Michael Ehrig. Sure great to have you back, Bob. Glad to be back. I get excited every time I open my mailbox to that plastic wrap. It's kind of like a Playboy for fish. You know, we don't have a centerfold, though. I don't know how to work that. I get this. Tell me, Michael, does Playboy still have a centerfold? Cheers. Okay, Wesley Ellis, let's see what we got going on here. I'm going way back in the memory bank. Probably 2001. You know, 2001 doesn't seem that long ago, but we were way into 2020 through COVID before it dawned on me that we didn't have any teenagers born in the 1990s in 2020. And here we are in 2024. You know, every teenager was born like 2005 or later. Like, what's up with that? But I remember you recommending a Hawk water testing kit. I think that's what it was. It was the size of a small tackle box. That's it. Fast forward 20-something years, what kind of kit device? I still recommend that one. I love Hawk. I love their chemicals. They have a fairly long shelf life. The kit you're talking about is a fish farmer's test kit. And I had one of those for a long, long time. Now, if you're not going to be checking a lot of water chemistry, don't buy one of those. But there's a number of companies. There's Hawk. Now you're testing my memory bank that don't go back more than about 30 minutes. I can't think of the others, but there are several. The key things to check about water quality or water chemistry is you check the pH. Now the pH is just a measurement. It's like a ruler. It's like a yardstick. It's like a cup of flour. You're measuring the volume. And a pH of 7 is 0 acid or base. It's balanced enough. So when the pH changes 1 point, that's 10 times what the last point was. pH less of 7 is going toward the acid side. A pH of greater than 7 is going toward the base side. So the second thing to check is alkalinity. You know, so alkalinity is going to give you a glimpse into whether your water chemistry is stable enough to help produce more fish by producing more plankton. Alkalinity is basically a measurement of calcium carbonate, how much lime is in the water, which is the key building block for bones. So in the water, things consume the nutrients and use these different minerals as building blocks to create their structural, you know, whether it's bones or like a crustacean, the shell on a shrimp, or, you know, a bug or whatever. So what I would recommend now is spend $40 and send a sample to the lab and get an accurate depiction of what your water chemistry is. I like to use Texas A&M Soil Sciences Lab. $40, you get probably 20 different parameters checked and give you a reference point. Joel, good to see you again, buddy, from Clinton, LA. Hello, Jerry Siebert. He's up in Oregon. All is good. All right, Leah says, is there an ideal layout or size to a small bluegill hatchery pond? I was thinking 100 by 50 by 6 feet deep. Okay, so that's 5,000 square feet. That's about a tenth of. I'd make it a little bit bigger, you know, and I would. Now, here, if you're really going to do that, if you want to build a hatchery pond, if it's a 1/10 acre or a little bigger, that's a good size. Like 50 to 75 feet wide, 100 to 150 feet long, and 6 feet deep at the deep end, and 3 to 4 feet deep in the shallow end. The shallow end's where they're going to spawn more. You can put some spawning beds in there, you know, up in the shallow area. So I tell you what, in these days and times, the supply and demand economic principle is applying to fish hatcheries. Fish hatcheries are selling out sooner, taking longer to get some orders filled, and I used to not be as big a proponent as having your own hatchery ponds, but now I think it's real important. If you're trying to grow some trophy fish, food is absolutely going to be one of your limiting factors, because most people, y'all included, are not going to harvest the right numbers or the right sizes of the right fish to keep your trophy fish on the track to continually grow and be honest to gosh trophies, because it takes work. And you can kind of hedge your bet some if you've got a 1/10 acre hatchery ponds. For example, I had 2 of those at LL Common 2 that we sold a couple of years ago. And with those 2 1/10 acre ponds, it was common. Now, I managed those ponds. I had a well to fill them. They had drains where I could drain them, get all the fish out. But I would typically harvest somewhere between 10 and 12,000 1 to 3 inch bluegill total every year, and still have quite a few 500 or 600 bluegill that are 5 or 6 inches long that I would take somewhere else. And all I needed was 30 or 40 adults to replenish that whole pond with babies. So yeah, you can grow a significant number of small bluegills in a hatchery pond if you design it right. Let's see here. Ooh, there's a whole bunch. All right. Tommy, I used to want a catfish pond, but my wife and I decided, I just corrected your grammar, sorry dude. But my wife and I decided to grow trophy bluegills like Sarah Parvin. Dude, I think that's stellar. And if you guys don't know who Sarah Parvin is, you need to look her up. That girl, her and her dad over in Alabama had got it going. Should I take all the catfish out of the pond and overstock the pond with bass to stunt the bass so the bass can't big enough to eat the big bluegills? That's what Sarah and her dad do, but they've got a much bigger pond. They got like a 6 or 8 acre lake. So, yeah, you can do that. That's actually the traditional way to try to grow big bluegills is to have enough large amount of bass in there feeding on the young bluegills, because the goal is to control excess reproduction, because the more number of head that you have, the more bigger head count you got, the smaller the average size is going to be, which restricts your ability to grow bigger fish because there's more mouths that have to eat more food. And bluegill, contrary to their catfish cousins, don't fill up the space. Catfish are going to fill the space. They're going to grow and grow and grow and grow till they're pooping so much the water can't control it, manage it, get rid of it, process it, and the water quality is going to deteriorate, and those fish, some of them, the weakest ones, are going to die if you don't eat them. You know, bluegill aren't that way. They'll get to a certain density, and then their growth rates diminish drastically. So you got to be having some way to harvest bluegills. Now, another thing you can do, Tommy, with your catfish, if you see that bluegill reproduction is too high, then you can start trapping some out. They're easy to trap. You can build a trap. Go online and look for bluegill traps or whatever you need to do, and trap some of them and sell them to your neighbors. There's Danny Mack. Yeah, you know, I don't know how to send out an alert. I think you have to do that. Yeah, okay, Michael. We're buying into that. Hey, there's Virgil Meyer from up in Iowa. Good to see you, buddy. Steve Thorburn. Uh-oh, I got spiked here. Let's see here. Let me back up. Yep, Steve Thorburn, late to the show. Hope is, yeah, everything's great, man. People ask me how I'm doing, and I say, I'm still leading a pretty cool life. How about you? And I am. I'm leading a very cool life. Frank James, hey Bob, how deep into the bottom would it be necessary to dredge out the water hyacinth seeds? Water hyacinth floats. Is that a trick question? Frank James from Shreveport, Louisiana. Are you trying to trick me? Water hyacinths float. I've never thought about dredging seeds of water hyacinth. I don't even know that they make seeds. I think they reproduce by kind of like duckweed does, where they reproduce and they break off. You know what? You don't stump me very often, but I think that's a trick question, and it might not be. I stand to be wrong here. I don't know the answer to that. Oh, I'm sitting here kind of stewing over that question. I never stew over anything. Cough syrup. Here's my final answer. I would never dredge the pond bottom to get rid of hyacinth seeds. I'd murder the hyacinth itself. There's my answer. I'm gonna stick to that one. Thanks for the curveball. Virgil, what do most people use to check water temp at 2 feet in depth? I tell you what I do. I used to buy thermometers from Boat Cycle Manufacturing, and I tell you what it was. I'll describe it. It was a mercury type thermometer with a hoop, a ring on the top, and blue, and it screwed into a like a little container. And you'd unscrew it and pull it out. And I had mine tied onto a piece of nylon cord, and I just drop it down in the water, let it sit for a few minutes, pull it up, and read it really quick. So that's what I did. Now, at my age, advancing, I don't do that much. I tell you to do it. Jason Dodd, as far as size, when does the pond become a lake? Hello, Chico. Hola. Good to see you, buddy. I love Chico. Chico's one of my very dear friends. Mike Cottrell from Palo Pinto County. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what Mark McDonald used to say, and I love this answer. As far as size, when does the pond become a lake? Well, if it's 3 acres in mine, it's a lake. If it's 3 acres in yours, it's a pond. You know, I managed Richmond Mill Pond over near Laurel Hill near Laurinburg, North Carolina. Richmond Mill Pond was 125 acres. If it's 4 or 5 acres, to me, it's a lake. That's the way it is. Now, when you talk to Ken Milam, Mike's Chico Garcia and I, our running buddy that has a radio show out of Austin, if they're west of I-35, it don't matter how big they are, it's a tank. That's what he calls it. If you go up to Lamar County, Texas, it's a pool. But, you know, if it's 3 or 4 or 5 acres, if it's 4 or 5 acres, to me, that's a lake. Let's see what else we got going on here. This is still pretty dang fun. Okay, Larry Hardesty, any pros and cons of dyeing the water? Yeah, we'll hit that. No, there's Gil Cannonberg. Turn in a few minutes before 7. What time? I start at 6:30 on Tuesdays. Okay, so now Frank says, no trick. I just see the new hyacinths popping up from the bottom in spring. I don't know. I don't know. I would murder them. Yeah, the cost of dredge is dredgeful anyhow. That's pretty funny. Okay, Larry Hardesty, any pros and cons of dyeing the water? Yep, I'm going to come back. Let me see what else is going on here. Danny Mack, found an electronic thermometer on Amazon with a 12-foot temperature lead. There you go. Now see, Amazon, that's the kind of the magic dust of anything you want to buy online. And like I was at my daughter and son-in-law's house last Wednesday to celebrate her 45th. I've got a daughter 45 years old. And I congratulated her because she is the second of my children to join a very elite club. My son Ty, who's 50, when he turned 45, I called him and said, dude, congratulations, happy birthday. I never dreamed I would have kids the same age as me. You know, because when you're looking through my eyes, I'm not seeing 68 or 69, I'm seeing 45. And I have a son that age, and now I have a daughter that age. It's like, what? Frank, I got that pun, dredgeful. That's pretty cute. Okay, so let me go back to Larry here. Let me be sure I'm not missing something. Okay, electronics. Yeah, Amazon. Oh. So we celebrated her birthday, and her husband Jason cooked filet mignons for us, and he kept raising the top of the grill, sticking a thermometer in there to get the right temperature. So I said, "Have you ever heard of the one called Meter? Meater, Meter?" And he had not. So I said, "Dude, I'm going to get you one of those," because we'd already had like 2 bottles of wine, and the meat was almost ready, and one of the bottles of wine that he opened was pretty expensive. So I decided that it was time to kind of reward him for a great night. So I went on Amazon about 8 o'clock at night. No kidding, 8 o'clock at night. And they live up in Gunner, Texas, north of Dallas. And I ordered a Meter thermometer, which is, y'all look that up when you get a minute after the show. Don't turn out now. Check it out, but look up a Meter. It's pretty cool because you plug it into the meat you're cooking on the grill, and it sends a tone to your phone and tells you what the temperature of the meat is, so you don't have to raise the lid up. You can take it out when the temperature hits right. It's the right number. He had it at 7:30 the next morning from Amazon. That's amazing. What are the ups and downs and ins and outs and pros and cons of dyeing the water? Well, all right. So most dyes that you use in ponds, their number one job is to minimize ultraviolet ray penetration into the water. Well, plants, plankton, anything green that's going to grow in the water column or coming up from the bottom has got to have UV rays, or it isn't going to grow. So what that does is it inhibits that source of energy to grow plants. So the pros are, if you put it in at the right time, look at my nose, it's shining. I don't know what that is. It's distracting. I don't like to be distracted by anybody's nose, much less mine. So what happens is you're minimizing the odds of a plankton bloom. Now, if you're trying to prevent the growth of filamentous algae, you should have done it back in December. Or January, because now we're getting today is the vernal equinox, like at 10:26 tonight, it's the first day of spring. So now it's time for the plankton growth to kick in. So the pros are that it's going to help prevent the growth of plants. The cons are it's going to help prevent the growth of plants. If you overdo it, looks like the tidy bowl man's been swimming in your pond, and that doesn't look natural. But I know a lot of people that believe in it. So, especially in northern waters, they have a tendency to become too fertile or grow a blue-green algae bloom. So if you have a pretty big risk of a blue-green algae bloom, then it could make sense to use that. But if you're trying to promote the growth of fish, you need to manage how you do it and when you do it. So, that's my answer for that one. Let's see what else we got here, and then we'll, come on. After Danny Mac, Virgil Meyer, I've got 47-degree water at 3 inches of depth. The minnows appear to be active. Those fathead minnows start to get really active around 45. When I say really active, I mean they start kind of stirring out of their dormant state at about 45. They begin to reproduce. Fathead minnows will start reproducing in the low 60s. But they'll start feeding around 45, 46, 47 degrees, and you'll see them start to move around. So the temperature that the minnows really start getting fired up is 55 to 60, and that's when they start to reproduce. The bluegills, Virgil, I am so sorry. Oh, that's going to be pretty funny right there. Virgil's going to go buy him a Meter. His wife is busting him in the chops. He must be talking about it right now. So what temperature starts, it just got kicked out here. Starts the bluegills, red ear, and perch. Perch get kicked off at 45 degrees. They start reproducing, Virgil, at 45 degrees. You should start seeing some tapes, some kind of a jelly-looking tapes with black dots in them hanging on some of your structure at your lake there in Iowa. So that should be going on now. And then the bluegills will kick in. They'll start to reproduce around 60, 65, see that. Red ear a little bit later. So you're still probably up in Iowa probably another 3 weeks. However, let me tell you this. I have seen across this entire nation this year Everything is 3 weeks early compared. Now, when Punxsutawney Phil didn't see a shadow and said that winter was going to be over, we weren't going to have 6 more weeks, I thought that was bull. It is not. He got it right. You know, we had redbud trees blooming 2 weeks ago. We never have redbud trees blooming. So I don't know what Daniel said to Virgil. Oh, Danny, that must be Danny Mac. Okay, got it. All right, I'm seeing. I love it when you guys have conversations amongst yourself. That's so cool. That's part of the fun of this deal. Shirley, oh my goodness, now you're going to be ordering another new meat thermometer. Hey, Shirley, this is really cool because you can do it. Because you don't have to stick your hands in the meat, you know, and you can do it on your phone. You can just tell Virgil, hey, do not let that brisket get above 165, dude. Stop it at 150 and let it rest. See now, Shirley, you can be looking over his shoulder, making sure he's doing it right. Hey, you know, here's the $79. You know, now that's a little more than 2 subscriptions to Pawn Boss. Hey, Pawn Boss magazine, there it is in its little bag. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date. It lasts a year. Okay, Eric, are turtles bad for a pond or ducks? Well, let's tackle the turtles. Here's what I tell people: if a turtle eats the fish deserved it. And turtles are perfectly natural, but one thing I've noticed is when you start really feeding the fish consistently, the turtles like that, and it seems like they come from everybody else's pond over to where your feeder is, and they're going to hang out there. So the downside to turtles is that they're notorious nest robbers. You know, if they want to go eat eggs out of a nest, they will. And there's no fish around that's going to stop them from doing that. So I don't care for that. Now, it's a rare occasion where I've come to the conclusion that turtles are impacting a fish population. It's just not normal. Typically, there's enough turtles there based on the food supply that they've got to eat. If they don't have enough food, they leave. You know, that's the thing about having legs. You can hold your breath. You know, they can come out of the water and go anywhere they want to. So, Shirley, I love that sense of humor. Nope, Bob, he's not home. He's over at the pond. It's a lake. You have a lake. So, the thing about turtles is, like at LL Kamatu, we had a 3/4 acre pond right by the house that we swam in. And I promise you, I have seen 50 turtles in there. So some of them with my kids and the older grandkids got to be target practice. And I thought that was too many because they would eat as soon as the dadgum fish feeder went off, you could see 50 little wakes, like little submarines, migrating right over to that fish feeder, eating that high-dollar fish food. So I'm not as a big fan of turtles now as I used to be. Now, snapping turtle, I don't care. They're territorial. In a 3-acre pond, you might see 2 of them. Those are all right with me. So that's my take on turtles. Ducks, on the other hand, oh, something just happened. I think somebody sent some stars or something. Oh, Vito sent 20 stars. Thanks, Vito. I swear, I don't know what that means, but I heard it's really a good thing, and if enough stars show up, something good happens. Vito Barnes, longtime friend. I knew Vito when he was in high school. It was like in the 90s, early 90s, like 91, 92. How old are we, Vito? Ducks. Ducks, on the other hand, I'm not nearly as big a fan of ducks. Not so much that ducks eat fish. They really don't. They'll eat your fish food. When that feeder goes off, they'll eat more than the turtles do. But the thing I don't like about ducks is it seems like them and geese, you know, for every pound of something they eat, they poop 2 pounds on your dock or in your water. You know, and their poop is hot. I mean, hot meaning nitrogen rich. I've actually come to the conclusion in several ponds where people were feeding ducks that they were growing so much duck waste that it caused a blue-green algae bloom. So if you're going to have ducks, don't feed them in the pond. Feed them downstream or feed them away from where the water will run off into the pond, because when they eat, they poop. So if you're going to have a few ducks, feed them elsewhere and do that. Thanks for the stars, Vito. I am gonna have to study about that or get Leanne to help me figure that out. Cheers to you guys. So let's start kind of wrapping it up. We got about 5 more minutes to go. What other tips can we think about growing trophy fish? You gotta have the right genetics. They need as much food as they can get all the time. That's tricky. You know, and the way that you're balancing that is you're making sure that your pond's producing it or you're providing it, and you're also eliminating mouths by culling fish that don't fit the program. So if you've got 12-inch bass that are overweight in a pond that's 5 years old, or the older fish are 5 years old, you probably still want to cull that 10-inch bass. Because if it was going to be food, it would have already been food. Now it's competing in the bottom of the food, the second level, the second tier of the food chain, which means it's taking away nuggets that could end up growing bigger and being morsels to feed those bigger fish. So you want the right genetics, but you need to be thinking about not just the fact that the genetics are superior. All the individuals in that genetic cohort are not going to be fish that are going to be thriving in your environment. You know, the analogy I use, and for those of you that watch this show regularly, you've heard me say this. If you have 2 AKC champion black Labrador retrievers and you breed those and she has a litter of 8 puppies, how many of those puppies are going to be great? Probably 0. Odds are high, 0 of them will be great. Odds are 100% there's going to be a runt. So just because you got the best genetics doesn't ensure that you're going to get the best growth rates. So part of your job is monitoring. That means weighing and measuring fish, plotting them on this spreadsheet that you need to get from us. You know, and that way you can track them and then be making real-time proactive decisions on when it's time to cull fish. So that's a real important deal. You know, and so providing the food with the right genetics and culling fish at the right time, those are 3 of the most important keys to growing really, really big fish. Okay, Eric, I've not intentionally put either in my pond. They just seem to show up. Well, I've already lost track of what we're talking about. Let me scroll back. Oh, turtles. Yeah, they just show up. Now, there's live traps that you can buy or build, and you can trap some and then either show them their Second Amendment rights or dump them off on a neighbor you don't like. So, hope you're laughing at that. I intended for you to. So, hey, listen, I'm going to wrap it up. We've been 58 minutes in. Purina Mills, Aquamax MVP is a great feed to feed your bluegills. Bass don't eat fish food. Redder don't eat fish food. Bluegill will eat fish food. If you've got bass that will eat fish food, that's because you bought them from a hatchery where they were feed trained early on. So feed good feed. Feeding is, you need to be consistent. Same place, same time every day. Virgil, it's probably a little bit early to crank your feeders up, but you ought to start thinking about that when the water temperature hits the mid-50s. Hello, Quail Man. Appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words. Eric built a second... Oh, really? You're going to put an AR on the turdies? Turdies? I don't know where that came from. Turtles. Mr. Turtell is out by the well. Raise your hand if you know that joke. John, you're welcome. So, hey, guys, I'm going to clock out and go have dinner. And I always appreciate you guys checking in and tuning in and watching this show. It really keeps me fired up. It really does. And helps keep me sharp, even though sometimes I don't seem sharp. Maybe I do. I don't know. But this is really fun because I love thinking about all these things and how they come together and how nature works. And, you know, I'm spending quite a bit of time in the Old Testament. And I'm seeing some things in Exodus I'm seeing the correlation between the plagues that God put on Egypt when he tried to get his people out of there And I see real world stuff like that. Not of that magnitude, but I see how he's working and what he does, like with water quality. When the water quality goes bad, fish die. When fish die, they stink. Then insects grow in the pond, and then here comes tadpoles and lots of frogs. So there's a lot of correlation. It's really, really fun to be studying that. So once again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see if we can check out again and check in next Tuesday night. So until then, everybody, adios.